The waves were swallowing the wreckage piece by piece, metal screeching as the tide dragged the broken plane toward the rocks, and in the middle of the smoke and fire, a young pilot stood waist-deep in the ocean, holding an unconscious woman in his arms, whispering, "Stay with me, please don't let go," while the sky above them burned orange. Before we go any further, if stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary acts of kindness warm your heart, take a second to subscribe to Kindness Teles, like the video, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us keep bringing you stories that remind us how good people can be. He had never imagined his life would come down to that moment. At 28, he was just a regional pilot flying short business routes up and down the California coast. Nothing glamorous. No private jets for celebrities. Just small twin-engine planes, early mornings, cheap coffee, and weather reports he memorized like prayers. He liked the quiet of it. The way the runway lights blinked before dawn. The smell of jet fuel. The soft rumble of engines warming up. Flying made him feel like the world made sense. But his life on the ground was far less certain. He'd grown up in a small town near Sacramento with a single mom who worked 2 jobs. Money was always tight. He'd fixed bikes for neighbors, mowed lawns, and studied at night under a buzzing lamp. Becoming a pilot had felt impossible, until a retired Air Force instructor offered him free lessons after seeing how determined he was. That small act of kindness had changed everything. Since then, he carried this quiet promise in his chest: if he ever got the chance, he'd pass that kindness on. The morning of the crash started like any other. Fog hovered low over the coast. The air smelled salty and damp. His schedule showed 1 passenger, a last-minute charter to a private island resort used mostly for corporate retreats. A wealthy CEO needed to travel urgently. He shrugged when he saw it. Rich clients were usually demanding, glued to their phones, barely looking at the pilot. When she arrived, though, she surprised him. She wasn't dressed in flashy designer clothes. Just dark jeans, a simple sweater, and tired eyes like she hadn't slept in days. She thanked him for flying on short notice and asked his name. Most people never bothered. During the safety check, she asked about the route, about how long he'd been flying. Her voice was calm but distracted, like her mind was somewhere else. Halfway through the flight, clouds rolled in thicker than expected. The sky darkened fast. He checked the instruments. A storm system had shifted. Not dangerous yet, but uncomfortable. She noticed his expression and asked quietly, "Everything okay?" He gave her a reassuring smile. "Just a little turbulence. We'll be fine." But the wind kept rising. Rain slammed against the windshield. The plane shook harder. Lightning flashed so bright it turned the cabin white for a second. Then came the sound no pilot ever wants to hear. A sharp bang. A shudder. One engine coughing like it couldn't breathe. His heart dropped. He moved fast, hands steady even as his thoughts raced. He tried restarting the engine. Nothing. The plane began losing altitude. He radioed for help, but the storm swallowed the signal. She gripped the seat, knuckles pale. "Are we going down?" He met her eyes and forced calm into his voice. "I'm going to get us down safely. I promise." Below them, through breaks in the clouds, he spotted a small strip of land. A rocky island with a thin stretch of sand. It wasn't a runway. But it was their only chance. The descent was rough. The plane bounced on wind currents like a toy. He guided it toward the beach, praying the sand would hold. The landing gear hit first, then everything went wrong. The tires dug in. The nose pitched forward. Metal screamed. The plane skidded sideways and slammed into shallow water. Silence. Then smoke. His head rang. For a second, he couldn't feel anything. Then he remembered her. He unbuckled and stumbled back. She was slumped over, unconscious, a thin line of blood on her forehead. Fuel smell filled the cabin. He didn't think. He just acted. He lifted her, dragged her through the broken door, and half carried, half pulled her toward the ocean as flames crawled along the wing. Cold water soaked his clothes. Waves slapped against his legs. Behind them, the plane exploded with a dull roar. He kept walking until they were far enough away. "Stay with me," he kept saying, like the words themselves could hold her here. After what felt like forever, she coughed and opened her eyes. She looked confused at first, then terrified. "Did we? We're alive," he said softly. "That's what matters." They were stranded. No buildings. No boats. Just sand, rocks, and thick green brush. He checked her injuries, tearing his shirt to wrap her cut. She tried to protest, saying she was fine, but her hands trembled. Hours passed. The storm drifted away, leaving a heavy, humid silence. They searched the wreckage carefully. He found a small emergency kit, a few bottles of water, and a flare gun. Not much. But enough. As night fell, the island grew colder. She shivered. Without hesitation, he built a small fire and gave her his jacket. "What about you?" she asked. He shrugged. "I run warm." It wasn't true. He was freezing. But she didn't need to know that. Around the fire, they finally talked. She told him she ran a tech company in San Francisco. Thousands of employees. Endless meetings. Lawsuits. Deadlines. Everyone wanting something from her. "I thought success would feel bigger," she said quietly. "But mostly it just feels lonely." He listened, poking the fire with a stick. He told her about his mom. About the instructor who helped him fly. About how every paycheck still went partly back home. She smiled. "You don't sound like most people I know." "Guess I'm boring," he joked. "No," she said, looking at him differently now. "You sound kind." The next day was harder. The sun was brutal. Their water ran low. He rationed everything carefully, making sure she drank more than he did. When she stumbled walking across the rocks, he offered his shoulder without making a big deal of it. When she got frustrated and cried out of nowhere, he just sat beside her until the tears passed. Not trying to fix it. Just staying. She wasn't used to that. Most people around her tried to impress her or ask for favors. He asked for nothing. By the third day, something had shifted between them. They laughed at silly things. Shared stories. Collected shells like kids. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about boardrooms or stock prices. She was just human. And he realized he liked the way she looked when she forgot she was a CEO. On the fourth morning, a distant helicopter sound cut through the air. They both froze. Then they started waving, shouting, firing the flare. The helicopter circled and dipped lower. Rescue. As they lifted off the island, she squeezed his hand and didn't let go. Back in the city, everything rushed back at once. Reporters. Doctors. Company staff. He figured that was the end. Different worlds. But a week later, she showed up at the small airfield where he worked. No assistants. No security. Just her. She handed him a thermos of coffee and said, smiling, "Thought you might miss the island coffee." They talked for hours. Then days. Then dinners. She invested in a scholarship fund for young pilots from low-income families, saying it was his idea even though it wasn't. He volunteered at her company's community projects. They kept choosing each other, again and again, not because of money or titles, but because of how they felt sitting quietly side by side. Safe. Seen. Months later, when people asked how a young pilot and a powerful CEO ended up together, they just laughed. The story sounded too unbelievable to explain. But they both knew the truth. Kindness had brought them there. If he had only cared about himself, if he had panicked, if he hadn't carried her through that water, their lives would have drifted apart like wreckage in the tide. Instead, one selfless choice changed everything. And that's what stays with me about their story. Sometimes love doesn't begin with grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes it begins with something simple, like giving someone your jacket, sharing the last sip of water, or staying beside them when they're scared. Those small acts can ripple further than we ever imagine. So if this story touched you, share it, and tell us about a moment when someone's kindness changed your life. Because you never know, your next small, brave act might be the one that saves someone, and maybe even brings a little love into your own world too.